Good morning. Welcome to Morning Meditation. Great to have you with us. May 10th, it's the feast of Damien of Molokai. And I've done him before. I did him last year. I find his story really fascinating. And what hit me last year is that he's probably the only Catholic priest that makes the National Park Service website. And so he's on nps.gov, and it's an interesting thing, I think. But this is the article that's on the NPS National Park Service website, and they start with a quote: "A person who visited Kalawao in 1884. His cassock was worn and faded, his hair tumbled like a schoolboy's, his hands stained and hardened by toil, but the glow of health was in his face. The buoyancy of youth in his manner, while his ringing laugh, his ready sympathy, and his inspiring magnetism told of one who in any sphere might do a noble work, and who in that which he has chosen is doing the noblest of all works." That was Father Damien. Okay, I'm going to cut back and forth between a couple different articles because I found some interesting stuff in each of them that helps fill in the story. And so this article is from Mark Lampert from Chicago Divinity School, who talks about the Catholic saint who dedicated his life to a leprosy colony in Hawaii and became an inspiration for HIV/AIDS care. Just the timeline on this. So right, Damien goes to Hawaii, I think, in 1864. And so context in the United States, this is the time of the Civil War. Of course, that did not affect Hawaii very much. It wasn't a state at that time. And so in 1865, the Kingdom of Hawaii, then a sovereign state, so it was a country unto itself, enacted an act to prevent the spread of leprosy. Any person suspected of having the ancient disease, which this writer says is mentioned as far back as the Bible, but we're pretty well aware of that, hopefully, would be inspected and, if deemed incurable, permanently exiled to a peninsula on the island of Molokai. So you get this, right? If you were suspected of leprosy, they inspected you and you had symptoms and could not be treated, you were sent to Molokai. More than 8,000 people fell victim to this policy of permanent segregation over the next century. Native Hawaiians renamed leprosy. I can't do justice to this Hawaiian word, so I'm just going to say they named it the sickness that separates family. Surrounded by steep cliffs and treacherous ocean, the peninsula served as a natural prison and soon gathered a reputation as a de facto death sentence. In the Catholic Church, May 10th commemorates the day one man moved to Molokai willingly. Father Damien, born Joseph de Vooster in Belgium, came to Hawaii as a young Catholic missionary and spent the last 16 years of his life voluntarily living in the leprosy colony. And so it's founded in 1865. He moves there in 1873. And so he's one of the he gets there early. Canonized as a saint in 2009, Father Damien was designated the patron saint of people with leprosy, or Hansen's disease. Damien landed on Molokai May 10th, 1873. In a now famous letter to his brother, he wrote that he would make himself a leper with lepers to gain all for Christ. A leper with lepers to gain all for Christ. It's quite beautiful. I was trying to see if they tracked his feast day from when he went to the island, or they tracked his feast day from the day he died. Sorry. For 2,000 years, care for people with leprosy has often been reduced to segregation. This was the case in Hawaii, where the Board of Health offered bounties to those who turned in suspected patients. According to the documents Kaluapapa, a collective memory, which documents residents' experiences in the colony, Damien employed his carpentry skills to build 2 chapels, new shelters for the residents, and a multitude of coffins. He provided rudimentary medical care, secured a fresh water supply, established an orphanage. At a time when fear of being near people with leprosy was the norm, the priest also ate with the residents from the same pot and shared his pipe with them. So he gets there in 1873. By 1885, he's showing signs of leprosy. And by 1886, he becomes formally known as admission number 2886. So I guess if they started at 1, he was the 2900 to enter. 3 years later, he succumbed to the disease. Damien's ministry garnered an international audience, elevating him to something of a celebrity. His death prompted an immediate response. The future King of England, Edward VII, proposed to erect a monument to Damien on Molokai, to establish a ward devoted to leprosy in London Medical Institute, and to fund research on leprosy in India. Damien's example inspired the creation of several other organizations devoted to the study and treatment of leprosy, from the U.S. and Belgium to Congo and Korea. In 1967, the French journalist Raoul Folleret presented the Pope with a petition signed by almost 33,000 leprosy patients, calling for the beatification of Father Damien. In 1977, Paul VI declared Damien venerable. That's the first step towards canonization. And then he cuts off the history. Canonized in 2009. I'm sorry, I can't see when he was beatified here in this particular article. Okay. I think we've got a little picture from Damien on Molokai. He's got that broad-brimmed hat on, right? He's got a hat on there. This is a little more history from the nps.gov. He arrived in Honolulu on March 19, 1864. There he was ordained in the Cathedral of Our Lady of Peace. He wasn't the first one who was supposed to go. It was actually his brother who was supposed to go, but his brother became ill. This seems to be a somewhat common story of how people ended up in the missions. Someone else is supposed to go, and then they end up sick, and so they ended up going, and so this is how he ended up there. He spent 8 years on the Big Island. In 1873, he learned of the need for priests to serve the 700 Hansen disease victims confined on the island of Molokai. He and 3 other priests volunteered to go in succession. Damien was the first, and soon he was on a boat carrying cattle and 50 patients bound for Kalawao. Damien was the most famous, but not the first caregiver or religious worker to arrive in Kalawao. He followed congregational ministers, Catholic priests, Mormon elders, and family and friends of patients who went voluntarily to Kalawao to help. Slowly, Kalawao became a place to live. rather than a place to die. For Father Damien offered hope. He spoke the Hawaiian language. Assisted by patients, he built houses, constructed a water system, planted trees, organized schools, bands, choirs. He provided medical care for living and buried the dead. He expanded the Catholic Church. He was not a retiring personality. He did not hesitate to badger the Hawaiian government and his church for more resources. These efforts attracted worldwide attention, resulting in heightened awareness of the disease and the plight of its victims. This is really cool because it's on the National Park Service website. During Father Damien's year at Kalawao, others came to help. A number of priests in varying lengths. In 1886, Joseph Duttonride. 1888, Mary Ann Cope and two of her sisters arrived. They, along with four brothers, carried Damien's work into the next century. He was there 12 years when he was diagnosed with the disease. Although the disease is not highly contagious, he had not been careful, as we heard earlier. He had done nothing to separate his self from the people. Damien was 49 years old when he died April 15th. Okay, so May 10th isn't the day he died. It's interesting, right? We get the date of his sainthood as the day that he arrives in Molokai. That's pretty cool. Because usually the day of your sainthood, the day we remember the sainthood, is the day of his death. But for Damien, it's the day that he arrived in Molokai. Mother Mary Ann was at his side. Shortly before his death, he wrote his brother, I am gently going to my grave. It is the will of God. And I thank him very much for letting me die of the same disease and in the same way as my lepers. I am very satisfied and very happy. He was buried in the cemetery next to his church, St. Philomena. The people of Kalawao had lost their strongest voice. Damien's death was widely noted throughout Hawaii and in Europe. As years passed, his devotion served to inspire thousands. Damien's remains were exhumed in 1936 and were buried in Louvain, Belgium. And then in 1995, his right hand was returned to Kalawao, to the great joy of Kalawapapa and the rest of Hawaii. 2009, was canonized a saint. His life and service to the sick and outcast countries to serve as inspiration for people worldwide. The story of Father Damien is a major interpretive theme at the Kalawapapa National Historic Park that provides educational inspiration to present and future generations of visitors. The upcoming canonization of Damien, of course, I guess this was written before 2009, it's saying that a number of people from Hawaii are making the journey to the canonization, and so pretty cool stuff. I wanted to say a word about Mary Ann Cope, and I can't remember if I did on January, her feast day is January 23rd, but I love her story too, in conjunction with Damien. Though leprosy scared off most people in 19th century Hawaii, the disease sparked great generosity in the woman who came to be known as Mother Marian of Molokai. Her courage helped tremendously to improve the lives of its victims in Hawaii, a territory annexed to the United States during her lifetime. So it's annexed in 1898. I was kind of wondering when that happened. You know, they were calling it a sovereign kingdom in 1863, when they started the colony. Mother Mary's generosity and courage were celebrated at her May 14th beatification in Rome. And Cardinal Martin's called her life a wonderful work of divine grace. She was born in Germany. She came as 2 years old. She came to Utica, New York. She worked in a factory, and there she joined the St. Francis Sisters in Syracuse. She was the post of superior and was twice the novice mistress. So she was elected provincial in 1877. She was re-elected provincial. That's the one who runs the whole order. 2 years later, the Hawaiian government was searching for someone to run the receiving station for the people suspected of having leprosy. More than 50 religious communities in the United States and Canada were asked. When the request was put to the Syracuse sisters, sorry, I said Cincinnati, maybe I said that here, but Syracuse, 35 of them volunteered immediately. On October 22nd, 1883, Mother Marian and 6 others left for Hawaii, where they took charge of the receiving station, which was outside of Honolulu on the island of Maui. They also opened a hospital. And so in 1888, Mother Marian went to Molokai to open a home for unprotected women and girls there. The Hawaiian government was quite hesitant to send women for this difficult assignment. They need not have worried about Mother Marian. On Molokai, she took charge of the home that St. Damien had established for men and boys. She changed life by introducing cleanliness, pride, and fun. Bright scarves and pretty dresses for the women were part of her approach. She's celebrated by a poem of Robert Louis Stevenson. I kind of remember this now. I did read that poem back in January, but can't remember what I've done earlier, but some things. But 30 years she dedicated her life on Molokai to the people there. Very beautiful. Thank you for joining us this day, remembering Marianne Cope and Damien de Vooster, Damien of Molokai, Marian of Molokai, Mother Marian of Molokai, Mother Marianne of Molokai. Great to have you with us. Peace be with you. God bless you. And so if you get a chance to visit that in Hawaii, give that a shot next time you're there. I've never been there, so I cannot say. But there's a national park there, so there has to be a way to get there. All right. God bless. Peace. Have a great day.